Welcome to my first ever wrap-up.
Yay!
As you are probably able to tell, I'm trying seasonal book wrap-ups because I'm a slow reader and I work a 9 to 5, so I don't read many books in the span of just 1 month. So I'm going to tell you what I read in March, April and May. As I'm filming this, it's late April, so a heads up for future me who will take charge later on. The first book that I read in March was Homegoing by Yagasi. We follow two sisters, Effia and Essie, but they do not know that they are sisters. And one of them is sold into slavery and the other is a slave trader's wife. And we follow the generations that come from these two women. I rated this 4 stars. I had a great time reading it because it is a well-written book and I actually really enjoyed the fact that each person, its offspring, gets their own chapter and it feels like we have a short story collection, but somehow all of the stories, all of the characters have such an interesting life. Like I never got bored and I cared for each character, and we follow many generations. We start from the 18th century and we get to present day, and we follow characters as they start from Africa and they move on to Britain and to the US. It's a brilliant book. I really loved it. I highly recommend it. I mean, it definitely deserves the hype that it gets. And I should mention that although it is a relatively short book, it's 300 pages, it took me longer to read just because the characters in this book struggle a lot. So it wasn't like a fun or a happy read, but again, I highly recommend it. Now, we totally change genres and directions with the second book of March because I am dipping my toes into dark romance, and I thought that the best book to start my dark romance journey was 157 by Penelope Douglas. The plot of this book sounds very interesting because we have two young people. I think they are about to finish high school, and they have been writing letters to each other for 7 years. They are pen pals, but they've agreed that they wouldn't meet in person. However, something happens and the boy, Misa, meets Ryan. This is how it is spelled. So he knows who she is, but she doesn't know who he is. And things happen and he has to be at the same school as her, and there he realizes that Ryan has been lying to him in her letters because she's not as kind and as a good of a person as she made him believe. Misa doesn't like that and he kinda bullies her so that she can get a taste of her own medicine. But yeah, the point is that he wants to teach her a lesson. However, of course, since they have this deep connection, whether they know it or not, feelings are sparkling and romance ensues. I rated this 3 stars. I read it very quickly and I had a good time, but there were two main things that irked me. The first thing was the fact that Misa is portrayed as an overprotective person, and something happens to his sister and I would expect him to blame himself. I think that if I were him, I would blame myself even a little bit, but he doesn't, and it just felt wrong for his character. I also didn't really enjoy the ending because Ryan was the one who was really thinking about college and what she will study and things like that. But at the end of the book, when we see her in the future, we get no mention about her studies, about her work or anything like that, and it felt unsatisfying. Another thing is the fact that we have a plot line about Misa's mother, and although his relationship with his mother is very important, we don't really get to hear her point of view, why she did some things, and it just felt that her perspective wasn't really well developed. Like, even if Misa got to the point that he didn't care about the intentions behind his mother's actions. We have this character in this book. Even if it is a secondary character, I would like to be able to understand them a little bit better. And I feel like I wasn't really given this opportunity. So yeah, I think that his mother was an interesting character, even though I do not condone some of the things that she did, but I wanted to hear more of her. So yeah, 3 stars. I think that it was pretty mild, but it got me interested in going deeper into the dark romance genre and things like that. The third book that I read in March is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. We follow a young woman who goes on a road trip with her new boyfriend, but she has doubts about this relationship. I'm going to totally ignore the abrupt cut that you just experienced, and I'll continue talking about I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is one of my favorite books. I think that it is included in the thriller genre, but it turns out for its creepy vibes. You have some scenes that kind of don't make sense, but they are very weird and creepy, and you try to understand what's going on, why weird and spooky things are happening, and you get the complete picture at the very last page, and I love it. My suggestion is that you should read this at night so that all the creepiness can really hit you. Actually, the structure of the book is very unique to me. I haven't seen anything like it before, because in every chapter we have like people gossiping, and I think that this is important to one of the themes of the book, which is that we as people, we don't only have to struggle to find ourselves and our purpose in life, but we also have to deal with people making their own interpretations about ourselves, which can be heartbreaking when they don't really get you. I don't know, it really hit me. And I haven't seen the film, but I really want to because I just loved the book. Then I picked up Freshwater by Akauke Emezi. This is my first Emezi book, and what a book. I really loved it. We follow Eda from the moment that she is born. She is a troubled child because she begins to develop separate selves, and when she grows up and goes to college in America, she experiences a traumatic event that crystallizes the selves into something more powerful. A lot of people, myself included, when they read the book, they thought that Ada was dealing with the multiple personality disorder, and I'm so sorry, I think that this term is outdated. Is it dissociative disorder? I will add the correct term here. But the writer said that this is not the case, but it actually has to do with spirits that she was born with. It is mentioned in the book that separate selves can exist in a person, is part of this mythology. So yeah, I think that I should just believe the book, but yeah, it is a great book. I would totally recommend it, but there are a lot of trigger warnings. It was hard to read because we have some very dramatic events being described. If you're thinking about reading a book written by Emezi, I would tell you to go for it, but always check trigger warnings first. Okay. Nope. In March, I also read The Duke and I, the first book in the Bridgerton series. I do not have the book because I borrowed it from a friend of mine and I returned it. In the first book, we followed Daphne's love story with Simon, the Duke of Hastings. I have seen the series and I love it. Since I am really excited for Pauline's season, I was like, maybe I can fill the void that we have until the first part of the third season comes out. I have to say, I didn't love the book. I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't continue with the series if I hadn't loved the Netflix show. Let me tell you about the plot of the book. Daphne comes from an affluent family, and since we are in Regency, England, she kind of has to find a husband because she's in her second year of looking for one. She really wants to make her own family. She wants to get married, she wants to have kids, but she searches for love. And she has the issue that all the men see her as a friend. So when she randomly meets the Duke, Daphne agrees to Simon's proposal to fake date so that she can be desirable to the men around her, and he can actually avoid all the mamas that want to introduce him to their daughters and make him their son-in-law. So they fake date. But there is some attraction there, as you can probably imagine. It was a fun read, I'm not going to lie, but there were a lot of things that I had issues with. First and foremost, I didn't believe that Daphne and Simon were good friends because the book presents them as friends then into lovers. But the only scene that I really enjoyed with them two was when they first met, and that was a great scene because this is where I actually see them as friends, because they meet and Daphne found herself in a weird predicament and Simon helped her. This is what makes them friends. You spend time with a person and you can help each other. Other than this first scene, I didn't feel actual connection and communication in their scenes. Also, there is the fact that all the characters kind of felt flat. The Bridgerton family consists of 8 siblings. Anthony and Benedict are the same person in the books, like no personality. I have to say I really liked Colin. He was my favorite character because he was playful, but he was protective over Daphne. He really wanted the best for her. Yeah, he was there to support her, and I really like that. Francesca and Louise, Simon couldn't even tell them apart. So again, no personality. And there is also Gregory. He was a child and he was fun. And another thing about the whole family is that towards the end, when the 3 older brothers go to protect Daphne and encourage her to go with them because they see that she's unhappy, she very politely tells them to go and that she can deal with her issues, and at no point did she show gratitude to them that they are there to fight for her happiness, to try to help her be happy, because this is what they wanted and it was clear that this was their purpose. But yeah, at no point do we get like, oh, thank you for being here for me, but I got it. It was like, no, go away, you have no right. And I'm like, no, they want to help you. Thank them and just say that, don't worry, I got it. Was I supposed to feel that they do the wrong thing? Because I think that it was very nice that they were actually there to help their sister. So yeah, that was weird. And the last thing that I didn't like was the fact that Daphne is portrayed as a nice person, but she lies to Simon about a very important thing. And when she realizes that Simon has also hidden the truth about another important thing, she blames him. Yes, she was right to be angry about Simon's lie, but there was this double standard that we never got to see from the text, that what she did, her lie, was bad. She also does another immoral thing, but Simon criticizes her, and rightfully so. All of her bad actions should be, again, criticized from the text. We don't get that, and I don't like that. Having said that, I will continue with the series because I want to see what happens in the rest of the books. And now we move on to the books that I read in April. Unfortunately, again, I do not have the books because the next 3 books are books that I borrowed from the library. Now, the first book that I read was The Treatment by Mo Hader, and this is the second book where the protagonist is the detective Jack Caffery. He has to deal with a case which reminds him a lot of what happened with his brother. So this police case really affects him and he takes things personally. Trigger warning for child abuse. There were parts that were hard to read. Generally, I like the book. I hadn't read anything like it before, so that was good. There was one thing that really rubbed me the wrong way, and it kind of makes me question if I want to continue with the series. And this is the fact that Jack does something very bad to his girlfriend. He understands that the thing that he did was wrong and that he shouldn't have done it, but at the same time kinda excuses himself. Yes, this is natural. We justify our actions so that we can sleep at night, but I felt like the text wasn't harsh and didn't really criticize him for his actions. Yeah, don't get me wrong, he is a troubled character. He has gone through a lot, but he really crossed the line there, and I just feel that this action was used as a way to just show us how damaged and how he has gone off the rails. But as the book progresses, we are just meant to feel bad for him and to root for him to find his happy ending. I can't, because I feel like we just forget about it. We excuse it due to his mental and psychological struggles. And no, I don't think that we should do that. Now that I think about it, I also feel that there were some fatphobic comments. Of course, there is one awful character who is fat, and we get a lot of descriptions of her belly at places that we don't really care about it. I felt icky reading about that. The fact that she was overweight, of course, could be mentioned, but I don't know why we have to use it when the hate that our protagonist feels about this person is described. I think that it would be like a 3-star. We have an interesting plot, but there were things that really rubbed me the wrong way. The second book that I read in April was Submissive by Tara Shumi. This was my second attempt to dive deeper into the dark romance genre. I didn't really like it. We follow, what was her name? We follow Abigail, a librarian who sends an application to become the submissive to Nathaniel West, who is a billionaire. Although she is totally new in that world, he accepts. And of course, she loves being a submissive to him, but she feels that she is falling for him, which is an issue. This is the first book to a trilogy. I'm not sure if I'll continue with the trilogy. To be honest, the first book ended in a great note. It didn't leave me any questions. I don't know what could be happening in the other two books. But yeah, I was satisfied with the ending. My criticism of the book and the reasons why I'm not sure if I'll continue is we have very flat characters. We don't really get much of a character development. The worst thing was the beginning of the book. I was bombarded with very short sex scenes that felt rushed and underdeveloped. Thankfully, this changed from the middle of the book and onwards. But yeah, I was really confused, and I also didn't feel this unresistible connection between our main characters. At the beginning, they wouldn't even talk to each other, they wouldn't converse. I mean, they were in the car at one point, and Daniel put on a song and asked her, "Do you like it?" And she just said yes, and that was it. No conversation, no like, "Yes, I love it, what kind of music do you listen?" Nothing. I think that this came from the fact that Nathaniel had told her that he liked the fact that she wasn't like rushing to fill in the silence. I think that she took it too far, Again, thankfully, they actually started communicating later on. To sum up, I was really disappointed with the beginning, but it picked up from the middle to the end. The third book that I borrowed from the library and I read in April was The Cook of Castamar by Fernando Muñez. I think this is how you pronounce his name. We are in Spain in 1720 and we follow Clara, who comes from an affluent family, but when her father dies, she struggles to make ends meet. Luckily for her, she's a great cook and she gets a job at the Court of Castamar. There we meet the Duke of Castamar, Diego, who has been mourning for his dead wife for almost 10 years. Of course, there is a romance between the two, but the main story is that Diego has an enemy who is plotting to bring him down, to make him lose everything that he loves. It was fun reading this book. At the beginning, I was really scared of its size because it is a 960 page book, but it was written in a very simplistic way, so no brain power was needed. It was very easy to follow what is going on. However, this means that we have almost no character development. I didn't really mind that, but right from the start you could tell who are the good guys and who are the bad ones, which can be a bit boring, but at least there were a lot of schemings and backstabbings, so it keeps you entertained. There are some violent scenes kind of out of nowhere because yeah, we talk about murders and schemings, but there were like two parts that felt like outbursts of violence when I didn't expect it, and I was kind of surprised. Like, we were calm a minute ago and now we are in the middle of a very violent scene, so that was a bit disturbing, but okay. And another thing that I should mention is that, as you can imagine, since we are in the 1720s, there were slaves back then, and also homosexuality was treated as this awful sin and this perverted illness that could destroy a person. The author tried to be progressive and have our main characters kind of break these toxic rules that were prevailing at that time. But as a contemporary reader, I wanted the author to make the characters who were progressive for their era to be more understanding. I, as a contemporary reader to a book that was published in 2019, felt a bit icky, even to some of the statements that these progressive characters made. These are the books that I have read so far, and I will let future me continue and let you know what other books I read in spring. And we meet again. It's probably a bit dark, and this is just because it's very cloudy outside, so we're not working with natural light, unfortunately, but this is a quick update. I want to tell you about the two books that I've finished. The last book that I read in April was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This is her debut novel, and it's actually my introduction to this author. She's mostly famous for The 7 Years Sleep. I haven't read it, but I've heard great things, and I think that it is the same vibe as The Dead Romantics. So what is The Dead Romantics? We follow Florence, who is a ghostwriter, and we find her at a point in her life where she doesn't believe in love anymore, and this is why she has problems finishing her book, and she goes to her new editor to ask for either a deadline or a new approach to the whole happy ever after ending that the publishing house asks from her. This meeting doesn't go well, but we meet, what's his name? Ben. The same night she goes out, she meets Ben again, and they have a better interaction, but Florence's dad dies. This is not a spoiler. So she goes back to her hometown, a place where she hasn't been in years because people bullied her because she solved a murder case when she was 13 years old, I believe. And the reason that they bully her has to do with the fact that she can communicate with ghosts. So she goes back to the town and she meets a new ghost, and for the first time after a long time she decides to actually help this ghost. I like this one. I gave it 4 stars. At the beginning I was really obsessed with it because I really want to see what will happen, but the things that I didn't really like was, one, the fact that I got a bit confused about the tone of the book. I mean, the first chapters feel like a rom-com, but then we have the death of Florence's father, and then everything kind of changes and everything becomes very grim. Like, we have this melancholic tone, which of course it makes sense because we are dealing with a serious and sad issue, but we see Florence struggle from the beginning of the book. Even in the first pages we had this like difficult situation because she wasn't doing very well mentally, but we approached that in a very comic way, which wasn't the case when her father died, which again, it is totally okay and natural. I just got a bit confused. Things got very dark suddenly. The only other issue that I had was the fact that although we could see that Florence and the ghost were kind of falling in love, it got a bit repetitive. Nothing was really happening because they were in the state that they didn't express their feelings. But I really loved the end. Yeah, it was a great book. Like, I gave it 4 stars and I do recommend it. It's just that I did have some little issues that irked me a little bit. And then I went to the library and I picked up Faust, a tragedy by Goethe. This is like a classical world literature piece. I saw a Greek production of this play like many years ago, I think something like 5 or 7 years ago, and I remember that I really liked it, so I wanted to read the original. In case you don't know, Faust is a scholar, but he's not happy with his life. He feels like gaining all this knowledge was in vain because he doesn't feel happy, and he strikes a deal with the devil and he plays a bet with the devil, and Faust promises that if the devil makes him feel satisfied and pleased with life, with all the secular pleasures, then the devil could take his soul. So we follow as Faust kind of gives in to, again, secular pleasures and delight. The play is divided into 2 parts. I loved the first part. In the first part we meet Faust and the devil and Margarita, who is the love interest. Gorgeous, amazing, super fun. However, I kinda lost interest in the second part. It was obvious that Faust wanted to create an epic play and an epic piece of literature, but we stopped being focused on Faust's journey and his decision-making process, in this attempt to find meaning in life and see what is most important in happiness, spiritual awakening, and achievements, or I don't want to say secular again, but or more secular pleasures. Instead, we got introduced to a lot of mythical creatures and Greek mythology figures and a lot of creatures that we just didn't really care about that much. Having said that, I do recognize that this is a masterpiece, and the fact that the majority of the play is like an extended poem that rhymes, it's incredible, and I would definitely go watch a play of Faust again. It's just that my reading experience in the second part wasn't the best. That were the 2 books that I wanted to talk to you about. I'll see you in the next clip because spring isn't over yet for me at this moment. Hello, welcome to the last update of this video. I'll tell you about the last book I read in spring, and this is Crossfire by James Patterson. Now, I do not own this book, I've taken up acting lessons, and some of our group members found this book outside the theater, and there was a sticker on the book cover, and also there was a note inside saying that this is a book that travels, and anyone who wants to read it, they can take it, read it, and their only obligation is that they leave it somewhere in the world for another book lover to find. I'm the bookworm of the group, so they gave it to me and I read it. I should say that this book is part of a series of the Detective Alex Cross series, but it's not the first book of the series. However, that's okay. I still read it because I read the first pages and it was pretty easy for anyone to follow the plot. As you can probably imagine, we follow Detective Cross, and in this particular book he is about to marry the woman that he loves. However, he mostly deals with a case where people in power who also are involved in serious scandals are getting unalived, and he tries to find who this patriot is. At the same time, Alex gets a phone call from a criminal that he had captured in the past, but he had escaped from prison, and he was out there determined to find Alex and kill him. Yeah, that's mainly the plot. I give that book 2 stars. It definitely belongs to the worst books that I've read in 2024 so far. Why? Well, although the beginning of the book was very interesting because it was unhinged. Yeah, it was a bit crazy, I'm not gonna lie, but in a good sense. After the prologue and the first couple chapters, things started to get boring. We had chapters from the perspective of the bad guys, so we knew what was happening, but Alex didn't, and we just waited until Alex could catch up with the readers. So in this case, where we readers have all the answers and we know everything, so there is no suspense, we know who the bad guy is, so we don't try to solve any mysteries. So what we expect is a lot of action. Now, towards the end of the book, where the action is, because this is where Alex understands what's happening and he gets face to face with the bad guys, all the action scenes start and finish in no time. Like, we don't even have the time to get worried that Alex might get hurt. All the fights are so quick. Yeah, it was disappointing. This book is plot driven. There is like no character development. I'm just saying that as a fact. Some people prefer action-driven books, so that's okay. But in case you pick it up, do not expect characters to learn anything or to change. This was my first Patterson book, and I gotta say, I was disappointed. However, if what I've said is actually pretty good reason for you to pick up this book, please do. And a good thing is that chapters are very short. The longest chapter is like 5 pages, and it is definitely a book that anyone can finish pretty quickly. So yeah, and now it's time for the outro, because those were all the books that I read in spring. Yeah, it was a pretty interesting and fun reading season for me. I still haven't found any 5-star books, but that's okay. I haven't lost hope. And actually, I'm very excited for the books that I am planning to read in summer. You should subscribe so that you get notified when I post this video. Yeah, I'm not going to tire you any longer. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope that I'll see you at my next one.